Welcome to Chasing and Repoussé. Several years ago, our students did a group project, and we were going to frame the outside door with it. For more than one reason that didn't happen, but we still have the panels that they made. They were all prearranged how big they would be. Obviously the theme is Egyptian, and these guys really they're going to get about as much instruction on chasing or repoussé as you will be getting. So without an awful lot of experiences, well actually with no experience, this is their first attempt at it. And you can see it's not bad at all. Here you've got the eye of Wadjet, and we can see some other designs here on the side. You can see that it's primarily one course of chasing. So a liner was used, and we'll explain what a liner is momentarily. Was used to outline the various shapes that we see here. And when you do that, it pooches the metal up, as you can see, and it creates some relief. Now, you may like that, you may not. Some students dealt with it a little differently. This particular student left the pooch in it, and we'll take it out in a minute. Right here you can see in this goddess that the back has been hammered flat, possibly with a broad chasing tool, and then this raises it up above it. So they've taken that, what I call that pooch, out of it. And a similar kind of thing happens with this one right here. And they've made an attempt to flatten it. We can still go a little bit more with it. And you can see some liver of sulfur here as well. On this one, they've left it in. They haven't gone and flattened it out. And so you get some pooching up here between the papyrus plants and around the water that you see down below. It looks like they've polished this too. On this one, the same thing. And I think that it would actually look better and more controlled if the student had come in and flattened this out. We're going to do that with this one right here in just a second. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to look at this one here and flatten it out a little bit. It's had one course of chasing on the front. On the back, I can see, I don't know if you can see it here, but there's been a little bit of pushing out from the back side here, on the eye right here, and also on this extension to the eye with a little cross, with a herringbone effect on it. So very little has been done on the back. So this is primarily one course of chasing, just with a little bit on the back. So it's got some work hardening to it. So it's a little stiff, which isn't bad. I'm going to come in and take some of this pooched out area out right now with this steel block. We could also use the anvil quite well, but this works well for our recording. And I'm just going to hit it, and I'm going to maybe try to protect a little bit some of these raised up areas in the middle. I can always push out things like this from the backside too. And of course, by hitting it on that side, we do get a lot of stress, and it wants to buckle. And if I feel that I haven't got enough flatness, I can always anneal it. So hopefully it looks a little more regular right now after doing that. Again, I may, if this were my piece, I may anneal it and try to get it a little flatter than it is right here. But you can see we've lost none of the chasing. It's all there. It's just knocked down some of the relief a little bit. I could have been more selective and used a broad chasing tool and then pushed it down. Of course, I would have left chasing marks in it, or excuse me, chasing tool marks in it, which I would then feel compelled to cover the whole surface with. So, but that's not a bad solution to it right there. And if we needed it to conform to a particular shape, like a column or something, a rounded shape, it's almost already there, but I could anneal it and then put it in place. All right? All right. All right, so for your projects, we've kind of uniformalized things to make it simple. And we've based it on the width of our copper sheets, which are 6 inches. And we discovered that we had some boards that were a little over 5 inches. In this stack right here, we see a hardwood, and Leanna has labeled them on the sides. And the hardwood is going to give you more resist to your chasing tools, less relief. And so if you want something that's fairly flat and a little crisper, then the hard block would be the one to use for sure. We also have some very soft wood here, and some of you have already used this. I know that Dan has. It looks like it's Western cedar. And this is kind of a rough side here. If it's too rough for you, you can always hit it on the belt sander and take it down. And you can see on this side how we have some designs left from previous marks there. But we have the soft option. Now we're going to go show you what we're going to do with these in relation to the copper. So stand by. Okay. My board's not as nice as your board. This is one that's been used many, many times, and you can see all the holes in it. It may present some issues for me, but I think it'll be okay. But I'm going to use this as my template, more or less, to make my cut on my copper. And the board is going to be smaller than your copper. You have a 6 by, what is it, 6.5, I think, inch piece. Okay, or it might be 6 by 6, just period. Now the last person to cut this off, which could have easily been me, left it a little bit gnarly here. And I'm going to take my hammer, kind of flatten it out, realizing that I've got some real sharp edges. I used my board, and your board should be at right angles, kind of as a T-square or as a square here to make a mark, okay? I'm going to use my ruler here to go ahead and finish that mark off with a Sharpie. And then, again, don't waste a bunch of copper here, but cut enough. And then use my shears, or if you'd rather, of course, you could use a jeweler's saw. Just joking. Okay. We're going to cut this thing off. Again, don't cut all the way through. If you do, what happens, you know what happens, you get the kind of that little distortion there. So don't go all the way through when you're cutting. Cut this off. That could be sharp. And remember, this could be sharp as well. So you can see that I've got a little extra here on either side with the copper. And you can use that to fold down over the edge or not. That's up to you. We'll look at that in just a moment. And so what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to bring this one right to the edge like this and mark it. And then take my Sharpie over here, mark that. Then come in and cut this. Now I'm using a soft one just because that's what we had an extra one of. All right, and that's it. So now I'm going to come in and take this piece. It's semi-annealed right now, but I'm going to anneal it, and I'll meet you over at the torch. And if you want to go a little bit faster, I can take 2 torches. Make sure you get it really good and annealed. And of course, this being copper, we can quench it immediately with our copper tongs, grabbing it, taking here a fresh batch of of acid, and there. And we'll wait for this to clean up. We shouldn't be long. And we will rinse and dry it off real well, and then we'll attach it to our board. Okay, so we cleaned up the metal, dried it off. I hit it with a little steel wool, so that we can see the surface well. Taking my wood and putting it on top. And what I'm going to do now is line it up. I'm going to fold the ends over. And you'll see what I'm going to do with those in just a second. Now, my wood I notice is not exactly squared up on the side, so I'm going to need to be careful to try to make a nice accurate line with this brand new little fine Sharpie. Okay, that's just on the outside of that. And then I want to come over here on this one. It's just on the outside of that, like there. I'm not going to go underneath it because that's actually got a beveled edge on it. Okay. Pretty good shape there. And I'm also going to mark, I'm going to end up drilling this into it, pretty close to the edge here, go about halfway, and doing the corners up here, maybe not too close to the corner, right there. And I may end up doing some here on the, I'll bring that down a little bit, okay. Do some along this edge too, but not right this second. Okay, now I'm going to take this over. I could just simply bend this around here, but this is pretty soft. And for this piece, I want a pretty crisp edge. So I'm going to take this to the vise right over here and put it in and then hammer this down so that it's nice and crisp. And we'll do something interesting with that at the end. All right? Right, so we're going to put this in the vise. And now this is a steel vise. It's going to it might leave some marks here. But I'm not overly concerned about that. If I were, I could take that down. And I'm going to put it right there, anticipating where that line is. I'm going to bend it over. Some of you guys know about this from your boxes earlier. Just bend it over like this. And I'm just going to get right on the edge. Okay. If I wanted that really crisp, I could use a steel hammer. Why not? This is a planishing hammer. Again, flat side here, slightly domed here. The flat side leaves less hammer marks. However, it gives you very little leeway. If you tilt it just a little bit, you'll get a smiley face in it. So I'm going to use a slightly domed side and just tap this down. Okay, I'll do it to the other side. Now, if you go all the way over, you'll pick up this little seam right here. Now, maybe you want that, I don't know. But that's just this little extra piece with the vise. Now we'll take this over and place it on the wood to see if it fits. So we're going to put it on the piece of wood right here and see if it fits. And sometimes it might fit one side better than another. Let's try it this way. I think that's a better fit right there. And so we're going to come over to the drill press in just a second and then drill some holes here and then tack that into the wood. So I noticed I had just a little bit of a gap and I'm bringing this down more flush with the side there. And I'm going to make sure it's over here like this too. And I may reposition my drilled holes. I also need to come in and punch these guys too with a punch. I'll do that in just a second. Okay, so I've remarked where the holes are going to go. I'm going to bring them in because I don't want it to come out the side there. I have a small punch here and I'm going to hold it in place like this and I'm going to put it pretty close to the edge just so I don't get on the surface, and I'm holding it down tight using a chasing hammer. Punch. Punch. And then punch. Okay, I'm going to drill these first and I'm going to come over and I'll do the other side later to make sure that this doesn't shift at all. All right, now I'm going to see you over at the drill press. Okay, so here's our drill press. I put in a 1/16 inch drill bit that I got for my skull project. It's one of there might be one more in the shop like it. So you want to be very careful with this. I've also got this positioned, the plate down below, which is adjustable, positioned where there's enough clearance here and also enough depth for us to drill the holes. Okay, so I'm going to turn this on. Drill it. I've also got some brads that I will share with you. That are exactly a 16th of an inch. I'm going to hold this in place here like this. Okay. Turn that off. And I'm going to go ahead and place those brads here in the holes. So I'm putting a brad right here. And tapping it in. You could put these on the front side too if you'd like. And then one here. Now if I'd used a bigger drill bit, these would not go in here tightly and they would want to come out on you pretty easily. And they may still. Now I'll come in and I'll drill the other side and then do the same thing to it. If anything, try to drill it straight, but if anything, drill it into the wood and not into the surface. That way the nail will hold better. Again, I'm putting pressure here to make sure that I'm not above this, so that this side does not float up any. All right, and I'll finish putting these brads in. You could also hold these with tweezers or with pliers. All right, so there's our copper. Okay, and I may, depending on my design, I may decide to put in maybe a couple more right here along the edge, just to keep it down. In fact, I think I will for sure. And if you wanted, you could incorporate this into your design. Where will this go eventually? Will it be part of a plaque? Maybe you'll leave it on the piece of wood. I don't know. But you could think about these nails coming in and being, or the brads being part of the design. So with that being said, I will use my ruler and then try to make it a nice even distance from the edge. Noticing that my edge is coming over just a little bit right there. And I know that this is not even here from that cut. And so this is right at 5.5 inches. What's 5.5? 2 3/4, is that correct? Is that half of 5.5? Yes. Oh shoot, okay. So that would be in the middle. So I'm gonna say about 2, come in about 2 here, and then come in maybe about 1 3/4. I think that's be good. And then there's 5.5, there's 1, okay. And I think that's, I'll punch these and just use my handy horseshoe nail right here. Okay, great. I'll drill these. counterclockwise. I'm going to estimate about how much I need here so I get all the way through. I've already got a piece of wood underneath here. Will this go all the way down? Yes, it will. Okay. I'm not going to go all the way in because it'll make this is very soft wood, so the brads will fit in a little better. Chances are these brads are going to pop out too. So I may need to come in with a screw or something later on a little bit bigger. So here's our secured piece of copper, annealed copper, on the sides, right? And also on the top. We can decide which one's going to be the top or which one will be the sides there. I think I'll go this way with it. And I'm going to use a piece of carbon paper that graphite paper that Leanna has purchased from Hobby Lobby. And you can get some too if you need it. You can also create your own by taking a soft pencil in the back of some paper and then doing your design on the other side. We're going to put it here on this, and I've just hit it again with some more steel wool. I'm going to add some tape to it just to secure it. This should be enough right there. Keep it nice and flat. Then I'm going to add our design, and this is a design taken from the Gunderstrop cauldron that was found, probably made around 300 BC to about the time of Christ. It was found in Denmark, but was probably made in Hungary. And this might be a kind of a Romanized, well, a kind of a Celtified, if you will. It's the early part, early times of the Celts. Possibly their version of Orpheus singing to the animals. There's a whole lot of other animals around here. You'll see that on the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation that I'll put on Moodle. So we're going to put this in place here, like here, kind of center it, and then we will just secure it to the copper, like this. That should be enough right there. We'll take a sharp pencil, and then we'll go over the design with the pencil. And so start somewhere where you can remember what you have done, okay? All right, I think that's it. So we'll take this off. Let's see what we got. And it's there, it's very faint, but I'm going to take a scribe or a stylus right now and go over everything. And I could, with this stylus here, I'm going to go over everything. You got to get the light just right. When I'm going to mark it, I could also use a Sharpie too, that really fine Sharpie here. Now it will rub off if you're not careful, but I could do this. And if I wanted it to be really authentic, I would be referring to the original picture on this as well. So I will continue with this on my own and take my time with it. And in the meantime, I will show you another piece that I've already started, and we can begin the actual chasing and repoussé. But I hope you get the idea here, and perhaps I'll have a chance to work on this and show you it in progress. All right. Another way to transfer the design, instead of using the graphite paper, is we could come in simply with a stylus. This one is really sharp, and just do a series of dots here, and make them close enough to where you can follow them. Okay, so like doing the outline of the face, you don't need a whole ton of them there to make that work. And these dots are not very deep, and so you will pretty much eradicate them when you start your chasing. But I'd probably take a Sharpie and go over them on my piece of metal. Again, if you had the original picture that you were using with you, that would be a real helpful thing, so that you could, if you notice any variations here, you could correct that. This is a small enough area that I could simply refer to the picture when I put it in. I wouldn't have to do all of the dots here. Okay, so let's just see what we have. Typically you would leave the tape in place so that you wouldn't shift your design around. Let's see what we have. Yeah. Can you see it? Can you see the dots there at all? All right, so I'm going to put this aside and work on it, show you another piece here. So, as we begin the actual process of chasing in Repoussé, we've chosen our board, we've cut our copper, we've affixed that to the board, we've transferred our design, it's all ready to go. So now we need to get our actual tools. And not any hammer should be used here. We should use only hammers that we can strike a steel tool with. This is a chasing hammer per se. This is one I would prefer right here. So if you're by yourself in here, use this one. This is one that's very, very similar, possibly a little bit heavier, a little extra oomph when you strike. This one definitely is heavier. I've noticed the handle's been turning a little bit, but it's pretty good right now. And this will give you a lot more power when you use it. A little overkill in my opinion for most things. You could, in a pinch, use a claw hammer, and many of you people have these at home. So we have those. You can also use leather mallets, and they work great. They're actually very big faces on them, and the tools may leave a few marks in them, but that doesn't matter. It's not going to transfer over to metal. This one's pretty small there. I guess you could use that. I probably would not. But one of those would work just well, just fine if there were more than one or two of you in here. So those are our hammers. Just a second, we'll take a look at the chasing tools. All right, chasing tools. The chasing tools that I think that you will use the most, if you're doing any kind of literal picture, like if you're doing an animal or a person, a tree, something like that, then there's a tendency to want to outline it, and it's a great way to define where you're going to be working. And to do that, we use liners, and so we have a vast array of them. These are fairly narrow liners here, fairly thin, and then as we move over to the left, we have some blunter liners ending up right here. I'll show you how to use these in a moment. My favorite one in this group is this little guy right here. And it's almost like a screwdriver, almost like a chisel. It's very narrow, and it will punch through if you're not careful, particularly if you keep working something and working it without annealing it. But it's like a polished chisel, and it's smooth. The corners are just slightly rounded, and this will give you a very nice fine line. And then there are a variety of other ones here that will work really well. Some are a little bit thicker, like this one right here, than that. Okay, we come over here, and some of these are almost squarish. I think I made this one to use for kernels of corn, but that's another story. Okay, we have a blunt one here, fairly short. all the way to getting to this one here. I made this one, golly, back when probably 1977. And it works really well. It's slightly wider on one end than the other, which is kind of good to know. But it's pretty uniform, pretty parallel. So liners work really well on the surface. And you can make curves with these. You can make actually fairly tight curves. We do have another group of chasing tools that are curved. And you can see this one is a fairly broad curve there, covers a lot of territory. Some are definitely much more narrow, like this one. And this would be like for very specific places. If you had a curve or a line that turned exactly like this, then you could punch that in there. It doesn't really work. I mean, it also could create like a fish scale or something as well, but good for texture. But in terms of making lines, even curved lines, I like the straight liners the best. We also have over here, getting back to this line of chasing tools, we have some blunter tools. Now this one's a fairly sharp square, so if you use it, it would kind of punch a square in. Just one like this. It wouldn't work so much unless you wanted a bunch of different squares going on to say work on a large area. These other ones are great for pushing the background down or for pushing something up from the back side. This one here, this is a commercial tool. It's fairly sharp edged and curved, as you can see there. This one is a really nice one. I modified this one, and it's got it's kind of a square, but it's been rounded off on the corners. And this is great for pushing back large amounts of material. I'll show you how we can use this later on. This one's very similar to this one, but a little bit more of a rectangle instead of a square. And this is a really much bigger one for pushing lots of metal back. We also have some other tools here. All these punches, you probably figured out I love to make dots, and you can make them both depressed from the surface or punched up from the backside, looking like little raised dots or bosses. And some are kind of squared off like this one, so to leave you a fairly crisp dot. Others are a little more rounded like this one, and that will leave you a less precise dot, but it would be a much more rounded one, whether you're looking at the depression or looking at the raised up embossed area if you work from the backside. And then we have a variety of different sizes here for that. And finally over here we have a variety of kind of specialty punches, specialty chasing tools here that are more like stamps, a single strike, and you get like a sunrise here. I got this when I was working in Southwestern jewelry in Arizona, and there are a lot of kind of really basic, iconic symbols that you would use in, say, Indian type jewelry. There's another one here I made. This is like a trout stamp here. It works pretty well if you have it really well annealed material, if you're working with, say, a harder piece of wood or working directly on, say, an anvil with the copper between it and your tool. But you can take a look at some of these. Some are star-shaped, variety of different shapes here. So we will have these identified, and we'll have them on the table for you. Probably put them in old wax boxes or some kind of container, and so that you will know. And we would ask you to put those back when you're done. I'd also ask you not to take them too, because there'll be people coming here and working. If it does come to shutting down the campus, then we will talk about some options that we might come up with. All right? Chasing tools. Okay, so you can see before you our chasing tools all lined out and all identified by their types. Do your best to put them in the box where you found them when you use them. I've chosen another piece to show you real quick. This is a piece I started many years ago, and I use screws primarily to hold it in. But you can also, here's a tack. We have some of those thumbtacks there on the next to bottom shelf, and then a couple of brads here to try to hold this corner in. What I like about screws is that you can take them out a lot easier than put them back in. It becomes a little more difficult to take these guys out. Sometimes using for the thumbtack or for brads or nails or that kind of thing, we can use some end cutters and then grab a hold of it and then hold them out this way. If we were taking out from our earlier piece, when this is ready to come out, now chances are these guys will probably already start to work themselves out. But we could also always come in with a tool like this putty knife and then wedge it in underneath this and then try to pop that out a little bit and then grab them with the end cutters. The same thing is true for these guys. These probably will stay in a lot better. And you can get in here and then wedge it up enough to where you can come in and grab and pull it out with these guys. Other pliers might work too. Anyway, we're not quite ready to pull them out yet, so we will start chasing. And I've chosen a liner right here, a small thin liner that I will use to begin with. Now, where do I start? Do I start around the edge here, or do I start in the middle? I'm probably going to start in the middle or continue where I begun years ago and work on it. Now I've got this straight liner here. And these are nice big broad tools, so there'll be no issues whatsoever with making that curve. And which one do I start with? Do I start with this one first or start with this one first? Well, you want to be able to see where you've been and where you are going. And if you're trying to do a parallel line, I'm thinking that it would be easier to start this line first here, and then I could see it from the same position. We're trying to keep it consistent for the camera. So, all right, and then I'm going to try to visually line this up here, which I could have done a better job with the Sharpie, but I can see where I'm off. And that's another thing. When you do your drawing, you decide right off the bat, am I going to faithfully follow the drawing, or is the drawing a guideline? And that I could then readjust later. So make sure that if it's going to be something you readjust later, that you readjust for it. All right. So I'm going to start here with it, and the first time you do this may be kind of a fairly slow approach, and you don't have to hit it that hard. I've really got more of a dotted line effect going on, a dashed line effect going on here, just to try to establish it. I'll go over it more later. Since you're still on campus and can anneal, we'll anneal this and then do it again. Go over it. So I started that first line there. And I want to grab some steel wool real quick and see what I've got, because the Sharpie is blocking some of that. Not too bad, but you can see it's a little bit rough here, but we're going to take care of that later. Okay, so going to come in and line this up here and try to keep this parallel as possible. Also, when I do this, I'm kicking the tool back just a little bit, like I'm doing a wheelie or something. And if you end up getting a stripe that's off just a little bit, don't fret. Chances are it's not that far off and we can fix it later. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the tip of my tool right down here, right here. I'm not looking at where I'm striking. I mean, I might start, establish where it is to begin with, but that's why you have a fairly wide, flat-faced hammer here, that you have a pretty good target. But just like in baseball, keep your eye on the ball. Here, keep your eye on the tip of your tool as it's making contact with the copper. Now, if I hit this really hard, I could punch right through it. I'm hitting it, moderately hard. If I hit it too light, I'm not going to be able to see it very well from the other side if I were going to do some repoussé work with it, hitting it from the backside. So now I need to come in and meet up with this other line that I had done earlier. Okay. And you can see that kind of pooching that we talked about earlier, how while it's pooching up like that. Now I've got this line that I had done before. Now I could go ahead and do a parallel line with that. Sometimes I will use a leather mallet to I just use the butt of this hammer here to kind of push some things down a little bit. Sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand, and that keeps it from getting too tall and therefore harder to control. I'm going to line it up with this guy here. By the way, this is a Celtic design. I'm called a Triskele, some people call it that. And though it was initially a pagan symbol, but it became used once the people of the British Isles and other parts of Europe became Christian. And they saw it as the three parts of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Okay, that got a little bit narrow, made my line a little bit narrow. I'm going to try to come in a little bit right now, push it back this way. This will be easier to do once it's annealed again. So, you see what I'm saying? You can see how wide this is here. This gets a little bit narrow. So, after I anneal it, it'll be a lot easier. And I can always then try to go this way and push this out some to create more of a little bit larger space in here. Not overly concerned about that right now. So I can continue with these other lines, and I think we'll probably end the video as I'm working on that. But I think you can start to see that there's some stress that's happening. Every time I hit this, it creates stress and work hardening, and it wants to, that stress tries to find a way out, and so it starts pooching up. And then when I get, if I may or may not be able to get to these lines here on this course. Now, when I finish all of this, I will, and possibly I'll get this line in here as well, maybe not. I will take the screws out, I will anneal it, clean it up, in the acid, water, dry it off, and then I'll flip it over and then use, and then work on the back side, and I'll try to reinforce this line a little bit. You really don't have to, but I could. And in that case, I would use a blunter liner. And I think we have some of those in here. Maybe one, something like this, that I think would approximate the thickness of the space in between these two lines here. So, and I can just push that out. Or I could also accentuate this by working with a broader tool. Oh, say like I could start with this one, and then start to, this one right here, and then push this back here around that. That would be after I annealed it. I could also, once I get into the corner here, obviously this is too big, so I would have to revert to a smaller tool, maybe something like this, and then maybe work it on the edge a little bit, on the corner, slant it a little bit to try to get that point. I may have to find another tool. I do have, in some of the stamps, I have some that are triangular shaped that might be just right to push this thing down right there. So I'm sure as I'll keep on going here. And you really want to get this annealed here so that you have a very receptive surface. And by the way, this is a little thicker metal than what you're using too. All right. Okay, so I've annealed this, cleaned it up. I've actually hit it with a leather mallet too to kind of flatten it out some. And you can see the back side of the lines. Now you could always come in and do your design this way. Start on the back, and if you like that, how that looks, that's great. Or you can do a combination of it. But I'm just going to come into the negative areas here, and then push that out. Well, the spaces, the little areas between the lines here, and then push that out so that it'll be a little more pronounced on the other side. All right, here we go. And I've chosen this tool here, which is it's actually with some of those little narrow places. I think it'll help widen it out some, but it's pretty good average here for this. If you want something that's not too big, maybe the same size as the area that you're trying to push out, maybe a little smaller, because I can come in and push it either way if it's a little bit on the small side. I'll go back over that before I quit. You can see the work hardening, the stress that's happening there. And move your piece as you need, so that you can see well. And as I'm doing this, I'm kicking my chasing tool back just a little bit. So clearly my last bit of hammering is going to be harder than my first bit because it has work hardened. It's kind of like a hand grenade. You hit it here, but that's not the only place that the stress happens. The stress radiates out from it. So you can see how it's wanting to release up there like that. Now I can come in and just a little bit of striking here. Let me get to where I can see. Try to smooth it out before the next course. Try to get what you can between courses because of the downtime of annealing and the pickling, the cleaning, putting the screws or the nails back in. If I feel like that line's a little bit kind of concave there, I can push it out a little bit this way. Then maybe push this one in a little bit this way to have a nice smooth transition between those. Some people like to clamp their boards down to the table. This is a little unnatural for me because I'm trying to make it where it let you be able to see it. But I think that's probably pretty good right there. If you'll give me just a second. Leather mallet would probably work better right here. Take a look at the other side. So a little bit of leather mallet work here. Down. You can also hit it with some steel wool. And you could also imagine, some liver of sulfur on this would cause the lines to be highlighted. Or actually, I guess the lines would be dark. And then we could have highlights there on the top. So you can see that's pretty good as a start. But you can also see that we have kind of a raggedy line here. And also these are kind of bumpy in here, which would mean then another course or two, maybe more, going around the edge of this, and then also on the other side here to make that much more smooth. And we can make it look very, very, very smooth. I don't know if you remember the silver bowl that I made with the Song of Solomon represented, but that was 12 courses of chasing that's working on one side, and then 12 courses working on the back side, flipping it back and forth. And I probably could have done some more as well. But yeah, it all depends on how clean you want this to be. And yes, so be looking on Moodle for our presentation on some historical pieces as well as some of Leanna's pieces and mine. All right, I think that's enough for today.